everybody, it's Sarah. We wanted to post a video for our kids at ECC today, and so we're going to show a video about a guy named Paul. Now, Aaron talked today about the book of Acts and what happened in it, and a lot about this book involves a guy named Paul. Now, Paul's name wasn't always Paul. He was called Saul, and Saul wasn't the best guy. Saul persecuted the church, which meant that Saul tried to imprison people or even kill people who talked about Jesus. But then Saul had a vision of Jesus on a road, and it changed his whole life. It changed who he was, and it really changed the message of the gospel because God used Paul to spread the word to the Gentiles, which was anyone who wasn't a Jew at the time. And Paul really began some of our first missionary journeys. So Paul was a very important person in the Bible. He wrote a big part of the New Testament. And I think you'll like the story of how he became Paul, and how it just shows us that no matter what is going on, that God can use you and that God can save you and redeem you. There were a lot of people who didn't think Paul could be a good guy because of the bad things he had done. But God used him for the gospel, to spread the gospel message. And so here's a little story about Paul. And so hopefully you'll enjoy and you can watch the story.
The Miracle of Mercy. Paul. This is Saul. Saul was a Pharisee who hated the followers of Jesus so much that he would hunt them down to be brought to trial in Jerusalem. And he would even seek to murder them. Saul was uttering threats with every breath, and he was eager to kill the Lord's followers. So he went to the high priest. He asked him to write a letter to the Jews in Damascus that would allow him to arrest any Christians he found there. He wanted to bring them, both men and women, back to Jerusalem in chains. Now Saul went on his way. And as he came near Damascus, a light from heaven flashed around him, and he heard a voice that said, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Saul cried out, "Who are you, Lord?" And the voice said, "I am Jesus. Rise and go into the city, and you will be told what to do." So Saul got up and he opened his eyes, but he couldn't see anything. So the men who were with Saul led him into the city. After 3 days, a man named Ananias came to Saul. He put his hands on Saul, and immediately Saul could see again. And with that, Saul became a follower of Jesus. He became the very thing he had tried to hunt. And he immediately began telling people that Jesus is the Son of God, and he taught them about the mercy of God that he had received. And all who heard him were amazed. He then went by a new name, Paul, as he began preaching not just to the Jewish people, but to everyone. Despite many difficulties like being imprisoned, shipwrecked, and narrowly escaping death multiple times, Paul continued to preach about Jesus. Paul said that he would do everything he could to save people and help them know God. And that's just what he did in order to reach people who would otherwise be unreached. And many came to know Jesus because of what Paul said. Paul taught many in his day through his letters, but even more have come to learn more about Jesus through the letters of Paul that can be read even to this day.
So how cool is that? God used a guy named Paul to do wonderful things for him, even though he had done some bad things in his past. But here's the thing, once Paul realized what he did, he asked for repentance and he was baptized. He was ashamed of what he did, but he didn't live in that shame. He knew that God could forgive him, and God did forgive him and used him for wonderful things. We still read books today that Paul wrote, books that offer us inspiration and wisdom and guidance on how to live a life for God. So I'm thankful, at least, that I know that God can use anyone, especially, if we feel like we've done something bad, but we can ask for forgiveness and be forgiven and live for God and do great things for him. And just because you're young, don't think that you can't do anything good for God. Paul actually writes to a guy named Timothy, who was a young guy, and tells him, hey, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example. Do things for me, do things for God, so that other people can follow. So don't think that just because you're young, or, you may be younger than some of the older kids at school or in church, or, that maybe it's only your parents' job to talk about Jesus. You can do great things right now. You can tell your friends about Jesus. You can learn about Jesus. I encourage you to ask your parents or your grandparents or anyone you're with what their favorite book of the Bible is that Paul wrote. Mine is Philippians. I love that book. Paul talks about having joy in hard times, and I really like that message. So we can learn a lot from Paul. Paul has a lot of stories in the Bible, but his conversion, his becoming a Christian, is one of my favorite because it shows how God can use anyone. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoy these little lessons. Hopefully we'll be able to get back together as a church soon, and you all can get back to junior church downstairs. But until now, hopefully you enjoy these lessons, and hopefully you like learning about Paul. Bye.